How do you see famous tech CEOs that are often looked at as role models today impacting young founders?
So I think it's interesting. I think that, if I were to summarize this really quickly, I feel as though there's been kind of a shift from like Zuck and Jack Dorsey to Elon Musk in terms of who's cool. And I think that Elon Musk is pretty cool. I think that it's pretty cool to build rockets. Certainly cool to build rockets that land so that you can reuse them. I think the tricky bit, though, is when you think of a role model. Zuck and Dorsey were building software, and software is extremely accessible to the everyday person, to the person who doesn't already have money, who doesn't already have a network, who doesn't already have experience. Elon made 2 software companies before starting with SpaceX and Tesla and so on and so forth, and eventually taking them over. And that's where he made his money. That's where he got a lot of his experience. And that was the foundation through which he could work on these way more expensive kind of frontier tech companies. And I think that oftentimes founders don't really understand that the level of funding and the environment in the Valley is really focused on software. And so folks who are doing hardware have a harder time getting support, getting money. It's interesting because when I talk to a lot of young founders, what they tell me is like, the hardware stuff seems more interesting and seems cooler, and seems harder and seems more innovative. And the thing that I always push back on there is just like, those things might all be true in a certain way, but is it accessible? The cool thing about software in the last 25 years is it's become accessible. We've built amazing quote unquote hardware things for thousands of years, right? The pyramids were amazing, right? But it wasn't accessible. The everyday person couldn't wake up and say, I'm going to learn a little bit and I'm going to make the pyramids. And I think the cool thing about software is now it's accessible to so many people. Becoming a software developer is something that is accessible to so many people, and creating products with software is accessible to so many people that's what's kind of reforming our economy. That's what's impacting every single product that we see. And I think that unfortunately in the hardware game, it still feels like it's the case that it requires a disproportionate amount of money fairly early in order to make real progress. And maybe that'll change. And certainly there is some slope of change, right? The kind of contract manufacturing in China and so on and so forth. But man, it's still pretty damn hard. And the thing that I think investors will tweet about but not really tell you for real is that while they'll tweet about the rocket startup all day long, the one that they're counting on to actually work is the consumer service that people need, or that B2B service that people need, that normal users need, and that can be built with software and tested and iterated fairly quickly. And because they understand that, hardware products are really hard, and they understand how much harder it is to fundraise for them and how much harder it is to iterate and to make progress. And I think one of the interesting things behind both Tesla and SpaceX is not only were they started by a previously rich founder who had a ton of experience and the ability to raise gobs of money, they're both government supported. Literally, SpaceX is basically in partnership with NASA, and Tesla got a $500 million loan from the government. It's not a surprise. It's almost evidence of how freaking crazy this is, that the government has to put up money for it because normal investors, maybe not. And so I really think startup founders should be careful about that. I think Elon Musk should be seen as an innovator and as kind of a hero. But, can you emulate him today? Most people can't. He is inaccessible to most people. Whereas the starting story of a product like Facebook or Twitter is extremely accessible to a large number of people around the world.